Are you ready to bring your real estate game to the next level? My name is James Prendamano. I'm the CEO and founder of Prereal. And over the past 25 years, I've closed over $1 billion in transactional real estate. Each week, I'm meeting with outstanding investors, high-performing individuals, and visionaries operating in the real estate space. These are the people that are actually out there in the real estate game right now getting it done. This podcast aims at bringing anyone's game to the next level. This is the Prereal Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to the show. We're joined today by David Pere. We have a real treat. David has a remarkable story. He's the CEO from Military to Millionaire. He's the co-founder of the Real Estate War Room Mastermind. He is clearly a heck of a resourceful guy. He's got an amazing story, and I think some real value we'll be able to deliver to the audience today. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, brother. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Where do you see the market heading? I'm curious to speak to investors from around the country and get an idea of if they're seeing what I'm seeing and where you think this ship is headed. So with that, David, what do you see in the next 1 to 3 years?
Yeah, here's where I pull out my crystal ball. And if I'm wrong, we all forget this ever got said. And if I'm right 3 years from now, I'm going to be on an infomercial saying the guy who predicted correctly. It's such a double-edged sword, right? Because there's two main things going through my head. One is, oh my goodness, this is so hot, and everybody's decided real estate is the answer. So fundamentally, now that the entire world knows about real estate, it's got to be at the peak. Like, we've got to be at the top end of the market. It's too crazy. People know everything. Like, everybody everywhere is talking about real estate. Like, it's going to come down. It's got to happen, right? Like, there's definitely that emotional side of the market. But then when I look at things analytically, it's like, well, inflation is historically pretty good for real estate values, right? They seem to hold okay. Inventory is ridiculously low everywhere, especially here. Like, I'm listing a house on the market, gone in 2 days, in a market where normal, so we listed a 2-1, not like your ideal, like, big family home, right? Like, just a little rental, 2-bedroom, 1-bath that could be a good starter home or a rental property. And we listed this thing at full market value and had a almost full price cash, no contingency offer within 3 days of going on the market, in a market where normal, like, days on market is like 45 to 80, right? Like, this is not historically a super crazy buyer's market or seller's market. And so it's like, I can't really argue with that. It's very hard to say, well, the market's doomed when the inventory, like, that's the problem here, is you can't find enough houses. And that's supply and demand. That's like the biggest driver of any, like, economic cycle, right? So that's kind of my camp right now, is like, okay, well, interest rates need to go back up, right? If interest rates don't go back up, I think the economy is eventually going to then that's going to be a reason that we see a crash here, because the Fed doesn't have any other levers to pull other than printing more money, which is bad. But as far as, like, boots on the ground, I feel like my market is extremely healthy right now. As far as market sentiment, I feel the same way. It's just the overlooming, like, emotional side of me that's like, everybody else is thinking the same thing I am. So it's probably time to start, So basically what I'm doing, right, to answer what people actually care about, is I'm selling the underperforming assets. And that's kind of my hedge, right? So I'm selling the 10 unit that makes good money, does okay, but is a headache. And I'm selling the single family that barely cash flows, and I have some equity in it. But I'm keeping all the things that cash flow well, that aren't a headache, that are decent properties at decent locations. And I'm buying everything I can with long-term fixed rate debt, as long as I'm getting it for 60, 70 cents on the dollar off market for current value. So I'm still paying, I'm paying today what I would have been paying 3-4 years ago on the MLS. So I know, okay, even if we do see a correction, it's not going to hit me that hard. And I'm making sure it cash flows well. And as long as I can get those two things, I don't know what the future holds, but I'm gonna keep buying stuff as long as I can get a good discount.
So if the market there is got tremendous absorption rates, and as always, supply and demand are the standard kind of key metrics for any market and submarket.
Yeah.
Where are you finding deals that are 60 to 70% discount to market?
This is where I should hold up a letter, but they're all with my assistant right now, getting run through the system. We two main forms, right? One is direct mail, right? So I use Ballpoint Marketing is kind of my go-to as far as direct mail. They do the handwritten, machine written, but they look handwritten letters. Had a lot of success with that. And then on the other side, we just started yesterday with 2 cold callers that we hired. One is in Egypt and one is in Albania, and they're both affordable. And holy smokes, so far today, apparently one of them has gotten 6 leads, which, right, if I can get 6 leads at $5 an hour, okay, let's go, right? That'd be the cheapest marketing source I've ever had. So I don't know. We'll try not to get my hopes up about how good that could be, but and we're just going to town with pulling lists of people who have pain points, right? They have a lien on their property, or the city said you have a code violation or whatever.
Yeah. So the power ISAs and the VAs and all of this kind of next iteration of real estate outsourcing, we have had tremendous success with them. So I think that what you're finding with your ISAs or your cold callers, you're going to find is the norm, and you're going to end up with the situation that you're going to have to solve for is how do you manage all of these great leads, right? So we've had tremendous success with it, and it's crazy how in any market, regardless of the metrics, there are always deals to be had if you just know where to look. It's something that people, I think, lose sight of so quickly. They feel, oh, the market is hot already. I missed the boat on this one. Nah, man, there's deals out there. There's gold. Yep. You just got to know where to look.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And that's exactly what it comes down to is it's the mentality, and it's just knowing, what to play with. Right. So direct mail has worked very well for us, but I also know that in this market, not a whole lot of people are doing texting or cold calling. So I'm going to kind of pivot into that as well, just because it's when I start hearing, oh, I keep getting these letters, and I think, all right, well, let me try something else and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So as the market remains strong down by you, I'm curious, who's buying all of the housing stock? Are you guys seeing a big influx from like Center City and from the big cities, people pushing out? Who's the base by you?
Well, a lot of my buyers are still investors. I don't think we've seen a huge uptick from bigger cities so much as our base seems to be the blue collar who couldn't get approved for a mortgage, and now that interest rates are lower and they've gotten some stimulus or whatever, if they were smart, they can afford a down payment and they can afford to get into housing right now with the way the rates are. I take that. I think I guess what I should say is that we aren't far enough into it to see that there's a trend as far as new buyers, but there's definitely been some growth from out of city, out of state. It's just not like, it's not big enough that you can just be like, oh yeah, there are people coming from New York. It's more of we've had an influx in jobs here. And so they're coming from places, but it's not like any one spot. We're not like Austin, where the entire world is moving to Austin from, San Diego, LA, and whatever, Silicon Valley. But
so influx of jobs, any specific segment?
It's just kind of weird stuff, right? So we got an Amazon warehouse, we got a Costco, we've got some Springfield has a decent amount of manufacturing. So like we've got a 3M plant, and a Budweiser has a plant here, and Bass Pro is headquartered here. O'Reilly's is headquartered here, but it's mainly more the like manufacturing side and like the warehouse side.
That'll do it, man. As the big cities decentralize and they no longer remain the epicenter for jobs, and a big reason for that is the decentralization of everything, including the warehousing and the manufacturing. We were screaming about this a couple of years ago. Get out of the overly regulated multifamilies up by us, at least, because legislative threats are top of every analysis now. Legislative threats are just brutal for us, and shift to M zone. Because and we feel that there still is a humongous amount of upside left in that market. Are you guys seeing any regulatory threats by you?
No, not really. I mean, the one thing on like the Airbnb side, they're not strict. They have some rules that don't really make sense here, and they're not driven by like hotels like they are in a lot of big economies, so much as driven by like some, as far as I can tell, some old neighbor was complaining to City Hall loud enough that they were like, these are annoying. Let's just kind of limit them. That's probably about it. I mean, really. So Springfield's fairly easy to deal with. The little town where our hotel is, we're actually waiting to hear back on an offer. If we get an offer approved, we're going to buy another 27 unit apartment in that town that actually shares a fence line with the one we currently own. If we buy that, we're going to own 106 doors in a town that has 3,200 people. So like 3% of the population will be our rentals.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's interesting. And so we have, in that market, it's like, as far as regulatory, it's like, well, we have the police chief's number, the mayor's number, and the city development number. So it's kind of more of a like, people call us and say, hey, would you, it's weird. It's totally different dynamic. But in Springfield, they're still pretty easy going. I mean, there's rules, but they're few and far between, right? We're an interesting state as far as, like constitutional carry and pretty easy going on a lot of life, which is nice.
Yeah, I think another overlooked part of the transition here, the decentralization, which again we've been screaming about for a decade. We saw the first wave of the decentralization, right? We saw the coronavirus hit, people broke their habits, right? 60 some odd days to replace a habit, another 60 some odd days to put a new habit in. And people said, hey, we could do this, right? We're gonna trade in our 9 to 5 and opt for a different life. That was people proactively that, for the most part, those were people that were a little bit more financially set, that had the flexibility to make those decisions and take a little bit of that risk. I think what you're going to see next is the companies that have had enough, and have kind of wised up and have gotten to a point where the regulatory madness and the litigious society that we're in up here, you're going to find these big corporations start to push back from the table, right? The numbers right now, believe it or not, and so few people look at this side of it because it's scary. 8% of workers, office workers, are back in 5 days a week in Manhattan. 8%, right?
Yeah.
Now, when the big companies are responding to some surveys and we're reading these surveys and they're saying things like, we haven't quite decided on when or what the future looks like, and we'll revisit things in Q2 of next year, that's company speak for we're not coming back, right? And they're going to start to look for those elements that can be contested, like force majeure in their lease. And they're going to start breaking leases out, and they're going to shrink, and they're going to relocate, and they're going to be then pulling the workers with them, right? So the first set was people could do it leaving. I believe this next run is going to be the companies that are now saying, you know what, let's trade in that Fifth Avenue office. It's 300,000 square feet that we pay $1 million a year fine because we're not green compliant, and we pay $5 million a year in taxes on. Let's go replace that with 5 offices that are 20,000 square feet. Let's get lean and mean in 5 of the emerging markets across the country and decentralize at a fraction of what the cost base is today. So I think that those smaller towns and these secondary markets and even the tertiary markets, there is still a lot of upside, because I think that, again, simple supply and demand that we talked about earlier, you're going to see those metrics start to flip, and more people are going to start locating to these secondary markets.
Oh yeah. And then if they can figure out they crack the code on the remote working thing, right? And they figure out like, oh, like I have a buddy, him and his wife are both high-end like accountants, CPAs for a company. And they were making, and I'm going to make all these numbers up because I don't remember. But let's say they were making $120,000 a year in San Diego, right? So they're bringing in $240 a year together. They relocated to Florida about a year ago, and their company was like, yeah, hey, we're totally cool with you guys relocating to Florida, but you're going to take a $15,000 a year pay cut, right? Because whatever, and cost of living. So the company saves $15,000 a year, or 30, because they were paying both of them for them to move. But in Florida, where they moved to, that 105 goes a lot farther than the 120 did. And so they're still better off. So it's like, if a company can figure out that piece, right, the geo arbitrage piece, now you got people who are working remote like they have been for the last 2 years. It's just, I feel like it's just corporate trying to figure out like, A, how do we tell them like, you're not going to make as much money, but it's going to be a lot better for you. And B, because it will, as long as they move somewhere that makes sense. And B, like, it's almost like the Marine Corps side of things, where it's like we've let them work from home for so long, but we can't just. But what if we have to call them back into the office? We don't want to let them go everywhere just yet. And it's like they just need to get past that fear. And once they cut that cord and let 80% of these people work remote and be successful, and they can realize like, man, we can cut our expenses so much. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Why would they be stupid to work from a $300,000 or 300 square foot? 100,000 square foot, place, if they can work from like, a 10 or 20,000 square foot place and have people all over the country and pay less for it.
Yeah, significantly less on the cost of real estate side. But then again, the regulatory, it's tough up here, man. It's tough to keep things moving anymore. There's just so many challenges. Much of the legislation, much of the changes are well intended, but we've long since passed that point where it's just become too heavy. It's just become untenable, and you're going to continue to see this mass exodus, I believe, until things stabilize and they start shifting. Because I don't think it's that big of a sell, David, to Joe or Susie, hey, we're gonna knock your pay down, by 20%, but you get to go live in Jacksonville, and the cost of living is significantly better there, and we're gonna pay for you to move, and you only have to be in the office twice a week. I think the population is ready for that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, especially like the younger population who wants to travel anyway, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. So, do you have any straight commercial in your portfolio, like retail? Or
I had a little bit of retail for a little while. We did it as a lease option, and we ended up ultimately not going through with it. But that was less because of it being the asset that it was, and more just because of some things that had not been pro forma'd accurately. So we got into it and realized this isn't exactly what we thought we were getting into. I wouldn't be opposed. There's a couple buildings in downtown in my market that I've been trying to buy for a long time. And it just, sellers are not always as easy to work with as you'd like. So been going back and forth. There's one gentleman, I've probably been to his office 6 or 7 times, and we just haven't found a price point that works for both of us, but I would love to buy his building. So trying to buy some more, and that's like a commercial retail front with an upstairs loft. So I would basically use the loft as my office and then rent the bottom out to in this case hopefully like an ice cream parlor that's coming in. But yeah.
Great. Well, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time today, Dave. What's the best way for people to find you?
Just Google Military Millionaire. We're finally getting to a point where you'll be able to find all my platforms there. We're Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. I mean, you name it, we're out there.
I really appreciate it. David Pere, everybody. David, thank you so much for the time. Everybody out there, as always, stay safe.